The title of this presentation, and I leave it nebulous enough so I can talk about what I think needs to be talked about. I entitled it, "You Are What You Eat," which is obviously true. Every cell you have in your body got there from something you ate. You get all new cells approximately every 7 years, including your brain, including your liver. So you're not the same person you were 7 years ago, hopefully physically and spiritually. On the other hand, we have some very rapid growing tissue. And the more rapid the tissue growth, the more susceptible it is to disease and attack. Your bone marrow produces literally trillions and trillions of red blood cells just this morning. The body has a spleen for the major purpose of taking out the very minor, a very, very small percentage of mistakes or of old cells. The lifespan on a red blood cell is 120 days. It's one of the shortest lived tissues, therefore you have to have continuous growth and processing. When you study chemotherapy, watch what happens. Why they always want to draw your blood and check you, see if I can poison you again. Because chemotherapy is going to have major impact on any rapid growing tissue. The goal, obviously, is the rapid growing tissue of the cancer, but it also affects your bone marrow. It also affects your immune system. It's also a very highly pro-oxidizing agent that the body has to fight the drug as well as the disease. It's deadly, and of course that's the intent of it. The other tissue that's very rapid growing is your intestinal tract. You get a new intestinal lining about once every 5-7 days. So when you study chemotherapy, that's the next thing you learn. Why am I so nauseous? Why do I have diarrhea? Why do I feel like my guts are getting torn out? Because they are. So bone marrow and intestinal tract are two incredibly rapid growing tissues that respond to health or respond to disease. When the bowel is concerned, the bowel as a tissue, as an organ, probably has more to do with your immune system than any other organ by itself in the whole body. That's why you're hearing things about gut microbe and how's your microbes and all these probiotics and prebiotics and all this stuff we're hearing. Well, if they would just eat their broccoli, they'd probably be fine. But the point is, we give people all these good bugs. The problem is, we put bugs in through the mouth, and bugs were never meant to go through the mouth because they should be destroyed in the stomach acid if you have any decent acid in your stomach. So giving people probiotics orally is a very small yield for the amount that they cost. You may not like my route of putting good bugs in where they belong, but it's putting them in through an enema. If you really want to change your bowel flora, you need to take a different route. People who have opportunistic infections have more problems in that area, and we're going to spend our time looking at you are what you eat, because truly that's it. And I didn't realize I was going to have the $6 million man with me this morning, but I'm glad he's here. Myocardial infarctions are one of the most misunderstood diseases in the human body. The typical rationale is that you wind up over time continuing to block up your coronary arteries like you would a rusty pipe that continues to degrade, and it gets fuller and fuller and fuller, and finally it occludes, and then you have a heart attack. That's not the way it happens at all. There's no doubt there is occlusion. There's no doubt there is blockage, but look at this. 50% greater, here we are at 68% of the people who have myocardial infarctions, 68% are from vessels that are less than 50% blocked up. Now, to show you how the vascular system works, if you've got 70% blockage, you still probably have no symptoms. I've put thousands of people on a treadmill and walked them, and I can't get any more accurate than that from my treadmill test. And I had a cardiologist that I work with on a regular basis, and he would say, well, your heart is good, you're fine, go on. The reason I wouldn't say that is because I want them to exercise. I was going to get a few licks in on them while I could, you know. We call it a teachable moment, okay? If you're standing there after 5 minutes on the treadmill and your tongue is hanging out and the doctor's saying, you're just getting started, you're either going to punch the doctor or try to figure out how can I get off this thing. Back to the story. We have no good way of evaluating these vessels short of major invasive testing and don't recommend it. PET scans are expensive. They would give us some of the indicator, but as far as angiograms, you just don't do those for a routine exam. So 68% of the people that have heart attacks are less than 50% blocked up and can have no symptoms. It can be their first case. And unfortunately, this group here is in men in their 50s and 60s, and sometimes the first sign of a heart attack is death. We lose them because when a vessel is more than, when we have vessels that are less than 50% blocked up, guess what? You don't have collateral circulation, meaning that as this vessel keeps blocking up, another vessel will get a little bit larger or whatever. We don't have that in this case, so we lose a lot of these. We have 18% in the 50 to 70% that may have symptoms here. That's only 18%, and only 14% of the people that are blocked up more than 70% we find on the heart attack list. So prevention is the only way to really solve this problem. And it's prevention before you need to. If you need to, it's not prevention anymore. Prevention means I get to prevent something. Medicine is not set up for prevention. They call it health, but it's not. I don't know how to say it. Prevention means you do something before you have a symptom, and this would be in this category here, way before that. So if you wonder why we're losing so many people from their first heart attack, this is the reason. We were working on a wrong premise. We were working on a plumbing premise, not a cardiovascular premise. You keep blocking up the pipe and pretty soon your water doesn't flow. Not true for the heart. The other thing is you may not get much out of that picture, so I'm going to explain it, okay? What you're looking at is a coronary artery sliced endwise. So now you're looking, quote, down the pipe. You're looking into the vessel. What you see in this vessel is down here, we have cholesterol built up in this area. We have a fibrous plaque. We've got scar tissue trying to protect you from throwing more clots. That's what we're trying to protect you here. Unfortunately, this vessel got stretched, and you can see where I have a plaque that has gotten eruption here, and when the plaque gets erupted, it tears the side of the vessel and it forms a clot. So here's a classic example of an occluded coronary artery with a clot formed and a heart attack, and you can easily see that less than half, so this is one of the group that's less than 50% of this vessel is blocked out. That would normally be the opening before this red clot was formed. That's what you're seeing. Here's the question. How does all this get started? It's the same thing we were talking about this morning. Inflammation, inflammation, inflammation is the only cause of disease, and it is all causes of disease. Everything fits under that category. Now, before we get too far down that road, your own body produces oxidizing agents to kill cells. Your body actually has the ability to kill off a cancer cell. It does it by oxidizing it. It does it by damaging it. It does it by that way of killing it. So I don't want you to think that everything outside is always not what the body uses. The body has its own. But I will tell you this. I would much rather have my body kill the cancer cell in me versus taking chemotherapy to do it. That's the point I'm making. The body has the ability to kill a cancer cell and not hurt the normal cell next to it. There's no surgeon, there's no drug, there's no chemical, there's nothing you can compete with that. And that's why we trust things we don't understand, and I don't understand. I've studied the body and will continue, but I'm finding out, when you get to where I'm at, you have more questions than answers. You think you go to school and you go to a good school, but they all run out of answers. That's what clinical practice is about. It's not just a misterm and tell me I'm practicing, and you want me to practice on you. But the point is, that's the best we've got. But an intuitive person hopefully should learn and pick up things as you move forward. And if doctors would listen to their patients, they would learn a lot quicker.
Yes, that's true.
Because I'm convinced that I'd make a terrible veterinarian because a horse can't talk to me. But I think I can make a good doctor because I'm willing to listen. And I'm one of these doctors that the shortest appointment for me is a half hour. Most of them are an hour, because you can't get a good job done, you can't miss mistakes, you can't treat the patient well if you don't know the patient, because their biggest problem may have minimal to do with diet that day. It may be because they're so stressed out that they're eating up their stomach, they don't need an antacid, they need to start dealing with what's going on physically, spiritually, emotionally, and that's the big deal. So most doctors poo-poo that and send you to the shrink, okay? I'm saying, no, you may be dealing with the most important thing, and you're missing it. Because the script that you write works on dead people. An antibiotic will work on a dead person because it kills bugs. It's like bug killer. You spray it on the bug and it dies. Has nothing to do with whether you're alive or not. I don't like that kind of way of medicating people. The other thing is that doctors have an advantage because they can give you a pill and you don't have to change your lifestyle. You don't even have to like it. You may not even believe it works, and it still works. To me, that's bogus medicine because you are not getting you to get involved and take care of yourself. And if we can't get to that point, we've lost everything. And that's what we've done in our country right now. We have lost the ability to have people be responsible for themselves. It's not my fault. You can argue till whatever, cows come home, and you're still going to have a problem. Lifetime risk of coronary heart disease increases with serum cholesterol. Well, why does it increase with serum cholesterol? If I'm trying to tell you that cholesterol is not your major problem, then why would I put up a slide like this? Cholesterol should be viewed as an inflammatory index. Why is your cholesterol up? Because the body perceives that you need it. Why else would a body produce it? Your body is extremely efficient. It is not going to waste your time. It is not going to produce things that aren't needed. So cholesterol goes up, whether it's men or women here, and the higher the cholesterol up, the percentage continues to go up. You'll see the yellow block is 200 to 239. The blue block, the lighter or the grayish blue, is less than 200, and the big one, the big darker blue, is more than 240 cholesterol level. Now those are American standards, and they're all wrong. Healthy people around the world have cholesterol levels between 80 to 120. And if you're above that, you have a problem. The Framingham study comes back from, well, that was a long-term study, probably 20, 30 years, and they said that men with cholesterol levels less than 150 had no heart attacks in their study. Well, I was glad to know that. So what they're really saying is that men with 150 or less cholesterol have less inflammation, therefore less buildup, therefore less problem. Remember that cholesterol is the secondary problem, never the primary one. International comparisons in cardiovascular disease, morbidity and mortality. You know what morbidity is, and you definitely know what mortality is. They're not here. Morbidity, illness, and death. Cardiovascular disease accounts for 25 to 45% of the deaths among different countries. So if we have this much variance in death rate, then we should study the countries who have a lower death rate. Cardiovascular rates per 100,000 range from 1,310 in Russia to 201 in Japan. Are you curious what they're doing? Okay, well, vodka's kind of hard on the coronary arteries. And rice and seaweed is a little bit better. Folks, this is lifestyle. And if you take hope away from a population, what are they going to drink? Not water. See, you have to realize this whole scenario fits. If you break a person spiritually, what do they have left? Exactly. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow. You know, this series about the coming of the flood, what's I'm sitting there going through the ark, or the whatever, the flood, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the end of time. So what do you think you're seeing? The question is, are you willing to be Noah or not? Going to preach for 120 years? We better get some good genes, wouldn't you say? 6.5-fold difference. In men from 508 in Russia to 84 in France, a 7-fold difference. So the total rate in Russia wasn't just the men, but the men in Russia, was 511 versus 84. So why the difference? These are 6-fold less total. If you compare it to France, or 7-fold difference. And the U.S. ranks 16th for both men and women. 16th of what? 16th from the best. We're number 16. Number 1 is probably going to be Japan here. So what are we doing? Migrant studies, the Nye-Han Sand study, showed that Japanese living in Japan have the lowest cholesterol levels, and if you have a low cholesterol, you have a low inflammation level. If you have a low inflammation level, you're eating diets that are less inflammatory, and your lifestyle is less inflammatory. Hopefully those toxins, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat, how they cope with their emotions. Lowest cholesterol levels and lowest rates of coronary heart disease. Those living in Hawaii, no, I didn't tell you enough about this study. We're looking at a migration of migrants. We study them in Japan, we study them in Hawaii, and we study them in the United States. We didn't change their genetics, we didn't change who they were born to, we just changed their environment. The biggest factor in the environment is what they eat. Those living in Hawaii have intermediate rates for both. Those living in San Francisco have the highest. It's not that we Americans are so unique one way or the other. If you feed the world like you do America, you will have America's problems in the world. And I still am at a loss to know why developing countries won't come to America and say everything you're doing is wrong when it comes to diet. Don't send us any more Babe Ruth bars and Marlboro cigarettes. You just keep them for you if you want to junk out, because we cannot afford to spend 1 out of $6 of our national budget, like you're spending of yours, to pay for people. Did you realize that? The health debt compared to the national debt is something that you can't ignore, because our health debt and what we spend on health care every year is a big factor in what we go in debt every year as a country. If we didn't spend $1 single on health care as a nation, as a government, you could spend as much as you want on your own, but as a government, we probably wouldn't be in debt. And yet, what do? We keep borrowing against a bad asset, but they still think we're a pretty good asset around the world, and so we get to borrow more money. Dietary inflammatory index. The dietary inflammatory index is looking at various foods and saying, give them a score. Now, we have 3 different diets on here, and these are the ones that I found. Fast food in general, whether it be Long John Silver's, McDonald's, or wherever. Fast food in general had a DII, Dietary Inflammatory Index score of 4.07 on the positive side. In comparison, I wish I had more. The Mediterranean diet, which a lot of people brag about, has some ability to reverse atherosclerosis, but it's not doing that well. They give that a score of minus, and by the way, you want to be minus on this, low score, 3.98, and the macrobiotic diet is quite unique. It usually is plant-based. The other unique features is it's food as grown in your local area. So a macrobiotic person in Ohio would not eat citrus because you don't grow citrus in Ohio. But he would eat your cucumbers and your carrots and your parsley and your greens and everything that's grown in the area. This is as much a religion as it is a diet. I don't have that particular belief, but they do plant-based, and some people with cancer believe that this diet saved their life. I'm thankful, but the point is, that's the best I've got. I don't have a plant-based vegan diet up here. I wish I did. I would like to know what the index is. Things to remember about this index. Number one, anti-inflammatory foods have major features. I want to deal with the mineral first. The mineral magnesium is one that has been and continues to be depleted from your food source in your food line. We go back as far as 1932 when they came to Congress and they were telling Congress that we're depleting the wheat fields, a little bit further west than here, we're depleting the wheat fields of magnesium. Therefore, our crop, our wheat, what you're consuming has lower and lower magnesium levels. This is far back as almost 90 years ago, 80 years ago. Well, no, getting close to 90 years ago. And it hasn't gone up since. So, on one hand, I believe in supplementation, but I always believe that you should do as much as you can with your healthy diet, and then you do what you can. So magnesium, any food, any natural food, any whole food that's high in magnesium is going to be one of your best anti-inflammatories. So keep that in mind as a mineral. Now, let's look at some other things. Here's the Mediterranean diet. See if you want to eat no, don't. Red meat, monthly or in small amounts. Well, that's enough to cause inflammation. Sweets, a few times per month. Well, I'm glad they at least addressed something. Eggs, a few times per week. I'm going to tell you that's going to flunk out because, see, the American Heart Association diet basically recommends the same thing, and they have progression of disease. People on the American Heart Association diet continue to block up over time and be in line for their bypass. So it's really not a healthy diet. The excuse is my patients won't follow it if I make it too strict. And I go, you may be right. I'm looking for those people who want to follow it. That's who I want to work with. And that's what we do. I realize that most people won't change. That is a fact of life. But there probably is 10% of the people that aren't having the opportunity to change because of our present medical system. I want that 10%. And they're the ones that walk in my office and they say really funny things to me. One guy walked in my office, his blood sugar was over 500. He said, "Doc, I'll eat cardboard if I have to." And I said, "Good, you're my kind of patient. I feed all of them cardboard." No. I said, "That's great." Because what he was telling me is, I'm retired, I have finances, and I am not going to go on an insulin needle, and I want you to do everything you can for me. So my homework was easy. I sent him out of there. You know what his prescription was? You guys know already. I've been here too many times. Nothing but vegetables. Not a vegetarian. Nothing but vegetables. No beans, no rice, no nuts, no seeds until you get this sugar down to where we have something to talk about. Nothing but rice, or nothing but vegetables. Now he could have them cooked, steamed, baked, broiled, or whatever, but nothing but vegetables. He chose to go with vegetable soup. His wife was a good cook, but that was one thing he could manage. So I'm 2 weeks later, his blood sugar was down to about 168. No medications, no insulin, zip, zip, zip. I go, great, he's got a pancreas. I got something to work with. It's always scary. The thinner the person that comes in that's diabetic, it's always scarier because I got less to work with. Because why do they have insulin resistance? But I've seen that turn around. I did my doctoral work on diabetics, and it's been very rewarding because they can make the biggest change and get the biggest blessing in the shortest period of time. It's amazing. Diabetics can go from being classified as a diabetic, and within 4 weeks, they can go back to the doctor and say, "Test me." And they have lost their definition of being diabetic. So, I'm tired of the excuses, and hopefully you're going to get tired of your own excuses. Olive oil and avocados here, fruits. Can you see where this, even where they hold this diet up as supposed to be the epitome It's an utter failure. So if Americans are getting bad information, how do I ever expect them to get better? They're not. Anti-inflammatory disease and cardiovascular disease. This dietary inflammatory index, the diet we're talking about, the one that's high would be like the fast food restaurant. That's the red line. And you can see over years, cardiovascular disease incidence continues to go up over the years. Even on the low dietary inflammatory, cardiovascular disease over years still goes up. Where's my plant-based, whole food diet? Because I want to see this line start here and wind up over here. There is no reason why this evidence is the best I've got from this concept. But if you applied this concept to Dr. Esselstein's RAVE program or Dr. Colin Campbell, we would see where they demonstrate that you get less and less and less blockage and the vessels are opening up. So we don't even have the right chart here, but this is the best I've got for you because this is from research. Anti-inflammatory diet, the common pathway. When I say that inflammation is the cause of all disease, I'm not just oversimplifying. Cardiovascular disease, we touched on that. Cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's disease, Lou Gehrig's, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, autoimmune diseases. That's the biggest one we've been fighting. Most of the autoimmune diseases that we look at and treat and diagnose today were not in existence when I was in school. Or we were missing them all. I happen to believe that the immune system is getting old like a garment really quick. And when you've lost your immune system, you've lost your population. Now, if I was thinking well and I wanted to do people in, there's two things I would do to get this right here, this autoimmune disease. The first thing I would do is I'd give them a lot of antibiotics. I'd give you an antibiotic for your runny nose, for your hangtail, nail, and et cetera, et cetera. I just pass them out freely. Go to the doctor, you get it. Oh, you have a viral infection? Well, this won't do you any good, but take it. And by the way, doctors aren't all bad. In fact, there's a lot of good ones. And I have them come to me personally. Sometimes I get to be a doctor's doctor. And they tell me the grief that they get because now they're hired by a hospital because they won't give a patient an antibiotic and they get reported. They're giving the patient good advice. You do not have a bacterial infection. I am not going to prescribe an antibiotic, and they go get grief from it. And so it has turned into not practicing good medicine. It's called advertising. And if we don't keep you happy, then we're out of business. So it's not about medicine anymore, it's about business. I'm going, why would they lower that, okay? We don't need doctors anymore. We need people to read the right page, and you come in the emergency room and they say, oh, you have chest pain. Let me open my book to chest pain protocol. Step 1, go to the laboratory. Step 2, get an x-ray. Step 3, sit down here. Step 4, wait 4 hours. Yeah. No. I mean, doctors, why do we need a doctor anymore? I just need a good secretary. No, that's what it's coming to. Because they have it so prescribed and so written, and if you follow this protocol, I don't care you get sued in court, you are practicing standard medical procedure. Well, poor docs. I go, wait a minute. You know, these are some of the smartest guys around, at least academically. And they go through school, usually put in their 4 years of medical school, 4 years of specialty, and you start going through some subspecialty. They might have 12 years, I'll get there, in before they come and see you. I'll give you an example. I went back to Loma Linda, I was talking with one of my professors, and he says, how's your training? He said, how do you think your training was? I said, I am so overtrained, it's almost painful. But you have to be trained for the worst case scenario, not the lower your cholesterol stuff. And then he looked at me and said, well, how would you like to treat runny-nosed kids all day? I go, okay, I got it. We are trained for the worst case scenario that walks through the door. I mean, what's the fear for a doctor? That someone's going to walk through the door that you have no idea what's going on. Well, that's pretty rare. But the point I'm getting at is that we have very well-trained people that are not allowed to practice. And when they do practice what I consider appropriate medicine, they've been reprimanded, and the management, the administration is more concerned about pleasing this patient than practicing good medical care. Whenever you give up that, then what you've done, you've shifted from medical care to appeasement. That's never healthy to do in this kind of care. Diabetes mellitus and obesity. Faces inflammation, initiating event, could be dietary, could be toxic exposure. Maybe you ate the rat poisoning, maybe something terrible happened. Pro-inflammatory attack, and you respond to the cellular level. This could be anything from laying down cholesterol plaque to some irritation on your skin. Anti-inflammatory healing response, and cellular rejuvenation. You get new cells. I'm going to skip some of the chemistry, but in brief, basically we're looking at the effect of omega-6 fats and omega-3 fats. You hear a lot about those two fats. They follow different biological and biochemical pathways. The omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory. But let me tell you something. Why in the world should a person who is already on a good diet that doesn't have inflammation need flaxseed or need fish or need whatever? The answer is they don't. So all this hoopla about omega-3 fats is a result of people trying to cover up for their Twinkies. So all the hoopla you hear is you're actually dealing with people who are sick. Therefore, when you look at the foods that God put omega-3 fats in, you're going to get adequate throughout the day by eating a plant-based diet. It happens automatically. But what also happens automatically is you get a significant decrease in your inflammatory fats. We call those the omega-6 area, and so you don't need as much omega-3. So some people are doing healthy things because they're trying to outrun their bad habits. That's never a good course to follow. Always take care of the bad habit, and then you need less to worry about with the rest. Anyway, we come down the pathway. The eicosapentaenoic acid, EPAs, these are basically inflammatory prostaglandins, but if they go through this pathway, you get prostaglandins that are actually helpful in dealing with inflammation and disease, less inflammation. Leukotrienes has to do with white blood cell chemicals the white blood cells put out. And then you've got your DHA, various chemicals. If you come down this pathway, you've got arachidonic acid, which is highly inflammatory. You've got inflammatory prostaglandins, and you've got leukotrienes that do not work right. 10 foods to avoid. Now, you probably don't need this, but let's just run through it quickly. Donuts, white bread, bread with less than 3 grams of fiber, which means it wouldn't be a whole wheat or a whole grain. Soda, as in high sugar, even artificial sweetening is probably even more damaging to your immune system. Stick margarines, you gave up the real butter, now you're eating this stuff. White pasta, full-fat dairy, movie theater popcorn. You ever watch that stuff? Not only do they make it in oil, they pump it oil all over this stuff. And by the time you come out, you need to go to the 10-minute oil change before you go home and get your blood changed. Luncheon meats and sugar-coated cereals, well, pictures are good, but we don't need to take a lot of time with that. I tell you what, anyway. I know, I am so biased. Had a question the other day, it says, they were asking me, well, how long have you been vegetarian? I said 66 years. People look at 6 months. And sometimes there's a church not that far from me that has what they call meetups, vegan meetups. And so they use the social media, they call it meetups, and if you go to a new area, you can type in meetups, and they have them for probably archaeology to eating. Well, this one's for vegan. So I thought it was a neat outreach that this church was doing to bring in a whole different group of people that you probably would never meet out there, and they bring them in, and once a month they have a vegan meetup. And this is not Adventist vegan meetup, this is vegans who are interested. And people drive for miles, they have, like me, come in to lecture. And so I get good humor. One man raised his hand, he says, "I've been a vegan for 2 weeks." And I said, "Congratulations." And he went through all his experience. It's like he had accomplished something, that he was an astronaut and go to the moon or something. But it was, so people really, this is really big stuff. So I don't say, well, I've been that for 66 years, because they're telling about what they're doing and how much better they feel. And now I'm going, awesome, keep going. So anyway, I get to lecture sometimes. These are all inflammatory and highly inflammatory foods, which is about 90% of what most people eat in our country. The blizzard. Yeah, they need to be out in a blizzard if they eat that, you know. Okay, we're back to our arachidonic pathway and inflammatory. Let me just skip through here. Well, let's make a point. What you're going to see here is what is normally used to disrupt this pathway from a medical standpoint, and it is effective for a price tag. Whenever you take a steroid, you suppress the immune system to get the job done, and you pay for it more than what it's worth. We talked about a life and death situation this morning, I understand. So steroids, aspirin would be the co-oxy pathway, and aspirin blocks that pathway. See, these pain-reducing medications do not stop the damage or the pain. They stop your perception of the pain. They block the phone message getting to the brain. That's one way of pain relief. The other way of pain relief, like the narcotic level of pain relief, is one that is not a pain reliever either. It's called a euphoric drug. It makes you so high you can't perceive the pain. Now, when you walk in the hospital room and you can tell the doctor gave the patient a little too much, you go, "I think you're feeling a little too good today," and they're cutting back on his dose, because see, they're trying to level pain level and perception out. Otherwise, the doctor gets accused for keeping half the people in the hospital too high. And they want more of that when they get out, and there you have your problem. And so a lot of minor injuries that could be toughed out are now, even down to your dentist office, it's oxycodone is probably as common as antibiotics now. That is a damnable drug as far as the effects and what it does. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Inhibitors, the COX-2 inhibitors, Celebrex, Viax, Mobic, and you'll recognize that some of those are no longer on the market. You know, admit it, folks. Guess where the drug testing really takes place? No, face it. Where does the drug testing really take place? No, on you. Because you're the biggest guinea pig in this whole outfit. Yeah, the rat may have passed the test, and the humans may have passed the test, but when it comes to millions of people taking Viax, it happened out here in the real world. The problem is when a pharmaceutical company admits that the drug is a problem, they have just opened themselves up for such major lawsuits, it's incredible. So now I see things going off the market with no admission of problem. Colchicine, sulfazide, leukotriene inhibitors, Singulair, Xylaflow, etc., etc. Saturated fats, we deal with the polyunsaturated, and we deal with the omega-6s, the GLAs, the AAs, I'm going to skip this slide because it's more educational. Reduce or avoid trans fats. Usually they're made in the laboratory or by the animal. Omega-6 fats, margarine. Any oil has potential problems. Some have more. And any product with a shelf life. Who was telling me? Oh, we were having a discussion this morning about how long the lifespan of a Little Debbie is. I don't know how long to answer that, but I can tell you, if bacteria won't get in there, Either it's a sterile product to start with, or they won't eat it. See, there are animals that are smarter than humans when it comes to diet. And if something has a long shelf life, it could mean that the animals won't eat it, or it's been radiated and sterilized to the point where there's no contamination. I'm not skipping anything overly important, believe me. Anti-inflammatory diet. Lose weight. Well, why am I worried about losing weight? I'm worried about losing weight because my fat tissue causes and puts off chemicals that have an inflammatory response in the body. It's that simple. So carrying extra weight that you think in case I get sick I can afford to lose an extra 10 or 20 is really the reason people get sick. Eat small meals, eat adequate meals, eat bulky meals. I expect you to feel full when you're finished eating, enjoy your meal, and if you're like me, mostly a brain worker, except when I'm home on the farm, I get 2 meals in a day. Usually what happens is I'll eat more volume at my 2 meals if I'm out there working a piece of equipment versus sitting in the office all day, because I don't like to sleep in front of my patients, you know. If they're sleeping too, then I make money while we're both sleeping. But the point that I'm getting at is I've only fallen asleep in front of my patient once, and they were either very kind to me or they were not recognizing that I was sleeping. But I woke up in front of a patient once, I'm going, this cannot happen again. And remember, I'm not spending 6 minutes, I'm spending an hour, sometimes longer. So we're sitting there and sometimes, and you know, you also don't want to yawn because that kind of gives them the feeling that they're boring me. You know, so you need a clear mind. Have some protein at every meal, primarily, but eat primarily fruits and vegetables. When I say protein, I don't mean a little link. When I mean protein, I mean, guess what? Broccoli has protein. That's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about almonds, they're talking about legumes, they're talking about grains. Remember, how does a cow survive their life? They build an 800-pound body, they make 3 gallons of milk a day, and they do it all on what? Case closed. Leafy green vegetables, flax, nuts, oils, etc. Anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you have to exercise. There's no way to get around it.
I remember seeing a list of oils we should avoid, so when we talk about taking in some oils, are we talking just olive oil, or are we talking?
No, there's no such thing as a good oil because of the nature of the process. It's a highly refined food, and olive oil is as refined as any of the rest. The other side of the coin is that olives, crushed, it has all the antioxidants with it. When you remove just the oil fraction, they tell you it's extra virgin and cold pressed. They never tell you about the process. They can still raise it to 380 degrees to clean it up and make it nice and golden. If you ever go to a health food store and look up olive oil in what they call the HAUN, H-A-U-N brand. First, if it's expensive. Secondarily, you go, why'd they leave so much mud in this bottle? Real olive oil that isn't refined, that's as close as you can get, and I'm still not recommending that. Here's the point. Anytime you have a refined food, without the extra antioxidants with it, it will become an inflammatory agent. So any of your programs that worked, we go all the way back to Nathan Pritikin when I was at Loma Linda. He was the first man that says, I believe I can reverse coronary artery disease. Then we went to Dean Ornish out of San Francisco. He says, I believe that I can reverse coronary. And by the way, these guys don't get the easy cases. Dean Ornish got the men and ladies who the surgeon said, I will not take the risk of putting you on the table. And after 1 year, the results were so phenomenal, that's why you're reading about it now. Little side note, Dean Ornish has put men on the same program and is watching their prostate PSA levels coming down. So the same diet that seems to reverse coronary artery disease is also helping to fight cancer. There's not 2 different diets, folks. There is one basic diet for recovery. Here's what we don't know. If you're a person and you've been healthy and you've been young and you use a teaspoon of olive oil every day for your whole life, would you have the problems I'm talking about? I don't have an answer to that. I would tend to think you probably would not. But for reversing disease, for dealing with diabetes, we take people off their oils.
But, and the only reason I asked is, I thought on the previous screen, you said it had oil in there with a positive, flax seeds or oil there. Yeah, what's that?
I will remove that.
You would move on. Okay, fair enough.
Sometimes I copy slide. Sometimes I copy. It says flax seeds or oil. His comment was, I'm saying that oils are inflammatory.
But is that flaxseed oil? Is that what you
That's what the slide says.
Okay.
Hopefully,
It says flaxseed or oil.
I will take that off so I don't have to talk about it.
The oil is flaxseed oil.
There's no comma, so technically it's flax seeds or oil. Oil could be taken in general across the whole board. Anyway, I will correct my slide. Thank you. Ground flax seed is a whole food. Just pulverized. It has the lignans with it, it has the antioxidants with it, it's got the magnesium with it, etc., etc. I was not an English major, if you want to know that, okay? Quit smoking if you do.
I can testify to that because I smoked for 20 years. I quit on my own for 2 years, but when God took it away from me,
It was gone. Well, praise God. Lose weight, obviously, if you need to. Stress management. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. The reason I say it's hard is because I guess it's hard for me. Some of you may be coping a lot better than I am. Because I like to get things done. I like to get them done now. And I will sometimes sacrifice an hour of sleep when probably I'm not making a very wise choice.
That's stressful to me, though. That's my problem. That doesn't
No, wait. You're misusing the term. There is things called eustress, which means it's actually probably not, you may not perceive it as being stress. Therefore, the only benefit I can help you with is that stress that you perceive is not stressful to you is actually less harmful to you. But it is still harmful. Stress is nothing more or nothing less than how much your body has to adapt to change. And if you have to adapt, the more change you have to adapt to, the more stress you're under. So not all, quote, stress you put as what we call distress or bad stress. That's why they use the word eustress and distress to try to answer that thing. But you're right. Some people, if I put you in surgery, it would just be the most stressful thing you would do. You put a surgeon in there, and he goes, no place I'd rather be. I get to put this guy's finger back on, and with some good healing, he's going to come and shake my hand in 6 months and say, thanks, doc. At the end of the day, I'm good, you know.
So you're saying there's still both stressful situations?
I'm saying that stress is a price tag that you have to pay. And most of us exhaust our stress coping, quote, reserve or battery. The way you charge up your stress battery is you sleep. So when you have a stressed out person and they're an insomniac, I've got a bad combination because you're not healing. And you're actually running on adrenaline. And adrenaline is like insulin to the blood vessel. It's highly inflammatory. It's a life-saving thing, but your body doesn't like you on it. And that's why caffeine, it may not be so much the caffeine, but caffeine actually doesn't allow the adrenaline to deteriorate, to degrade as rapidly. So the higher the caffeine level, the more your adrenaline level keeps pumped up, and people confuse that with good energy. No, it's hyper. It's back to the methamphetamine example. These people are just wound up and no place to go. Vagal nerve stimulation via abdominal breath work. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? There's whole techniques. This vagal nerve is the nerve that affects your breathing, your lungs, your stomach, and your heart. That's the vagus nerve. Just think of it running down the middle here. When you do deep breathing exercise, hopefully in not a polluted room, okay, or outside, you're getting fresh air, what that does is an incredible effect on having a calming effect, on reducing your blood pressure, on dilating vessels, and calming your mind. I'm not trying to teach you self-hypnosis or breathing techniques in that form right here. I'm talking about going out. You can do whatever you want to. This isn't meditation. This is called using physiology and hyper-saturating your bloodstream with oxygen. You're sitting in a room and you're taking a test, and all of a sudden you hear a person 3 seats over, they take a deep breath and just, I'm going, boy, that guy's stressed out. That is a sign that a person's not coping well. Maybe he hit a question that he couldn't answer. But what did his body do? He tried to get a little better oxygen and get rid of some carbon dioxide. See, your system is set up not for oxygen. Your system is set up for getting rid of carbon dioxide. The kicker that makes you breathe again is when the carbon dioxide level gets high in your bloodstream. Remember when you were a kid and they had the contest who could swim under the water the longest in the swimming pool? So what did we all do? We hyperventilated. You know the trick. We would hyperventilate, blow off all this carbon dioxide, dive into the end of the pool, and swim further than the other guy. Well, why were we able to do that? Because you blew off more carbon dioxide, took this much to develop. It wasn't because you were low oxygen. Yeah, your neurons weren't doing too good, but you won the race. So it's all this is plain physiology and makes sense when you see it. Treatment of depression. Now, I would stand with Neil Nedley for most of his treatment. Most depression, once you straighten out the life, once you deal with real issues, once you change your thinking, this is not the problem. But I'm going to tell you an easy way to change your thinking. Get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night and it will change your thinking. Many people are depressed for no other reason than sleep deprivation. And we have an insomnia industry. And social support. I can't say more about that. They say that men who are married live longer than women. Sorry, ladies, I guess you're more benefit to us than we are to you, maybe. But we get to live longer because we're married to you. Hey, what a compliment. At least take it that way. The other reason is that people who go to church, people who have social interaction, people who have other people that believe they're valuable. Absolutely essential. There's nothing you put on that. And this is why I would like to hear a report from the Adventist Health Study that Adventists don't live an extra 10 years because they eat Little Links. I would like to hear that Adventists live an extra 10 years because they believe in God, He is the security of their life, they believe in fellowship, and people are more important than things, and start going through the whole list. Because people would rather take a supplement or even a drug if they knew it was going to give them 10 extra years than really deal with being sociable. Because true social support means you've got to give of yourself. Okay, same slide again with a healthy way to do it. This is the slide I wanted to get to. Wow. I was supposed to start another meeting at 3 o'clock. You're going to have to, no, don't eat fast, not for my sake. If I am going to change you, or if you're going to change you, how's that? And you want to deal with the inflammatory process of arachidonic acid going down this metabolic pathway that can cause inflammation, pain, vessel walls getting blocked up with things. Here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to knock out the phospholipase A2. I'm going to give you onions and apples. Anybody interested? Has quercetin in. If I'm going to give you turmeric, I'm going to deal with the curcumin in that. If I'm going to give you feverfew, by the way, these are herbs, it's going to have those compounds in there. And guess what? Every one of those herbs will not have a side effect, will not cause a suppressed immune system, will decrease the inflammation without any negative. How about over here? The COX-2 pathway. What if we eat more onions? What if we eat our apples? An apple a day, you're right. The British came through with a great study, and you rarely get this because it's pharmaceuticals, expense, etc. They compared statin drugs to apples. This got me really good, and you can tell why I like it. They gave one population an apple a day. They gave the other group a statin drug every day and valued their cholesterol-lowering effects, specifically the LDL, the bad cholesterol. Guess what? At the end of the study, the apple group was just as effective as the statin group. Now, oh yeah, definitely better for their health, no muscle cramps, I'm talking about we're looking at one parameter here. It was definitely a lot healthier. We're looking at lowering the bad LDL cholesterol. Now, here's what shocked me. Of course, there's socialized medicine there in England. Guess what they did? They gave them all statin drugs. But I want to tell you another point that we really miss here in America. They gave them all statin drugs. They didn't give them apples, even though they had the evidence that an apple was just as effective. Now, they could eat an apple on their own. But here's the point I'm getting at. Like I said, they gave them a drug and they gave them apples. That was the study. So if you're going to keep it up, you have to give everybody an apple to keep on going. Apples are more expensive than statin drugs in England because they don't put up with the nonsense that we have here in America, where we even invent part of your Medicare plan. We call it Part D of your Medicare plan to do what? Thank you for the extra tax, Uncle Sam. That is utter nonsense. So England says, we're a big customer, Merck, Sharp, and Dohme. If you want to sell us statin drugs, we're going to pay 3 cents a pill. What do we say here in America? Oh, Mr. Pharmaceutical, I know you need to make $2 on each pill that costs you 3 cents, and so we're just going to put a special tax in and people have to pay these outrageous prices. So in England, statin drugs are cheaper than eating an apple a day. See, you have to look behind these studies just a little bit to figure out the logic. I'm going, I can't believe it. Now, you are welcome to eat an apple a day and throw the government's pill out the window. Yes, I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to make a point here that we think backwards way too much of the time when it comes to our health care. Turmeric, rosemary, a seasoning or an herb, red pepper as in capsicum, as in cayenne pepper, and ginger are very effective ways for changing the metabolic pathways. And once again, onions and apples. Can you see a common thing here? Onions and apples are pretty awesome food. Turmeric, red pepper, incredible circulation. Boswellia and rosemary also. Boswellia is known as an anti-inflammatory herb. Excuse me? It wasn't on the list. I'm not saying it won't work. I present what it should be. I would expect it to work. Mediterranean diet, I'm not going to take your time with this. They say it's more tolerable. Anyway, I'm going to skim through here, see if I've got something to wrap this up.
On the internet, they keep saying you shouldn't eat sweet potatoes because it's a gut killer or whatever. Do you believe that?
I'm back up. I missed part of what you're saying. Sweet potatoes are what?
Like they kill your gut flora. Your gut flora. They said if they
No.
take one thing off your diet, don't eat sweet potatoes.
There's, I have no evidence of that. And if you're worried about it and you go with organic sweet potatoes, by the way, it is very easy to grow organic sweet potatoes.
They're probably a pharmaceutical company that's going to take the sweet potatoes off your diet.
Here's what I have found out. There are certain people that put out certain opinions that have very little basis for what they're saying. And I'm sorry they don't like sweet potatoes.
Yeah, you're right.
But sweet potato is not in the same family as white potato, which is the nightshade family. So it's yes, they both grow on the ground, they're both tubers, but they're totally separate from that. So I see a lot of nutritional information that's just not accurate, and I would put in that category. I don't know of anything that would cause the death of bacteria in the bowel, except for very high dose, like golden seal, and I use it sometimes for bacterial infections. I know that long-term use of that could be a potential problem. Garlic does kill bacteria on the surface of the skin. If it can do it there, it can kill it in the bowel. But any of these do not come anywhere close to taking an antibiotic repeatedly to almost sterilize your intestinal tract. So even worst case thing in the natural area is not anywhere near a problem. I'm curious. You got me curious about sweet potatoes. I'm trying to figure out why people say what they say. Yes, Gail.
How can you include cayenne pepper?
What do you mean, how can I include it?
Well, I mean, it's hot.
Well, some people like their food with a slight little bump to it.
I mean, I don't like anything that's
Well, then you do great in Costa Rica as compared to Mexico. You can take it in capsules, and you could take it in a green drink. There's ways you can hide it if you're looking to hide it.
so hot. That's why I think it's like.
By the way, you saw you had
What does it do to your stomach?
you have many more choices.
Apparently, it works pretty well.
The important part, and this may be hard to handle, but cayenne pepper, not the seeds. We're talking about the plant. They call it the fruit, not the seeds inside. The seed is really where you get the hot part. So the cayenne pepper actually does more to heal a stomach wall than damage it.
Yes.
Because either the increase in blood flow does so much more healing for that ulcer in the stomach than the irritation. I will never tell you there's no irritation, because it's the old rule. When something's hot, when it's not, you've got some inflammation. So when I put it in my mouth and I feel like I'm getting burnt and and the food is not hot, I'm going, something's going on here. So I use it mostly therapeutically.
How does that relate to the council that we have that we should be doing?
I think you'll find two things. You'll find we're talking about black pepper or white pepper, and your other thing you'll find is you're probably talking about the seeds that they grind up to use that. The seeds are going to be always the more irritating part of that. And they tell me that black pepper is a very small pepper, I guess almost like a jalapeno or something, as far as it growing or something. It's not like your bell pepper or cayenne or your banana pepper and all that. I think it's strictly the plant. It's color. They both are highly inflammatory to the mucous membrane. That's why we try to avoid them.
So that's why we're supposed to.
Yeah.
But the cayenne is different.
Cayenne seems to actually have a healing quality. Like I said, it's still hot. I'm not debating that at all.
No, but I'm just.
But I have too many people that have healed their stomach ulcers. I mean, I have people that use it for that purpose.
As far as Sister White saying we shouldn't use pepper, it's not, has nothing to do with cayenne, it has to do with the white, black, because of the way it affects us.
In general, anything that irritates the mucous membrane, you should be careful of. That's why you knock out cinnamon and cinnamon oil. It's irritating So you go through the irritants, that's what you're dealing with. Medicinally, I would use cayenne. Eating a lot of it in your regular diet, you may not be worth it. But I also know that black pepper and white pepper, what you're using there is mostly, I believe, the seed portion. Yeah, and I've looked at it from a couple of different angles from that. And sometimes you'll read statements where it says spices. Well, you put cardamom in there. No, most ladies say I use cardamom because that's okay, but I won't use cinnamon, and I won't use nutmeg, and I won't use cloves. Well, you stick a clove in your mouth, and you realize probably why you won't use cloves. The other thing in her day is they were using things for preservatives, so anything that would kill bacteria was a benefit. So they would use a lot of salt-cured things. Everything from brine, your pickles, your cucumbers that are soaked in salt, people use those. Salt and bacteria can't live. A bacteria can't live in a certain level of sodium chloride. The other thing is that they also used a lot of vinegar. And you know that you go back to New England right now, what do you find out? It's vinegar in the beets and vinegar in the green beans and vinegar, and that's acetic acid, and that is inflammatory to the bowel. It also denatures the B vitamins that are in your food, which means that the vinegar added to a food that has B vitamins in gets chemically changed to where it's not an active thing anymore.
So you can substitute
Lemon juice is an excellent option without those negative problems.
Would apple cider vinegar?
Vinegar's vinegar. Yeah, well, it's white distilled apple, and I know, believe me, I've read that apple cider vinegar is thought is doing anything. The best thing you do with apple cider vinegar is wash your floor or get the mold off your wall or something. It's effective. It's just not for human consumption. Even you get from Bragg's, even though Patricia Bragg wears an incredible hat, she puts her picture on every bottle. I'm sorry, that's a different side story. Well, folks, thank you much. I appreciate your time. We get to talk this afternoon. I hope you and I expect you to enjoy your lunch. So do I need to close with prayer? Would that be appropriate, or what do you want to do? I'll sit down then. Appreciate that. In fact, we're so wonderfully made that our bodies can put up with all this nonsense that we try to offer you as a living sacrifice. And Lord, I pray that you'll change our hearts. I pray that you'll change our minds. I pray that our thinking can be improved so that we can see you more clearly. And we ask this in Jesus' powerful and holy name. Amen.